relate to Kṛṣṇa. The arti ceremony is performed even by the gopis. So even the highest devotees, they still perform these same processes of deity worship directly to Kṛṣṇa. So when we are worshiping the deities, we're practicing these processes in the stage of practice. And in the stage of realization, we internalize them and perform them spontaneously within our mind. That's it. Pass the drum. Drum, da dum, da dum. Racing against time to get the microphone before we tune the drum.
Question and a couple comments. A question would be, once you attain complete self-realization and you go back to the spiritual world, and if Kṛṣṇa wants you to perform some devotional service back on the earth, for example, so you come back as a Nitya Siddha?
Yes.
Okay, that's the whole meaning of it then. Okay. And then I also had a comment on deity worshipping when you internalize the process. And the first experience was when we watched the deities in Santiago. And it was such a nice experience. And when I chanted 64 rounds, I would actually do the bathing ceremony with Kṛṣṇa in my mind all the time, all over again. And that way I was able to purify some of the dirt. Yeah. And it was a very nice, a pleasing experience.
Yeah, this is one of the services, like in my relationship with the lion. That's what I do. I bathe him. It's one of my services. His mother is saying, "You don't come to dinner unless you take your bath." So it's like, okay, you know. So then he'll go to the river and he'll take one little drop of water and put it on his head. Say, "Okay, I took my bath." He's such a rascal. So one of my services is to bathe him properly. You know, you make sure you bathe him properly.
And I also wanted to comment on
I'm not finished.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But he hates taking his bath. You know how cats are.
So do you have to force him?
Well, let's just say it's an adventure. You can't force him. He's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So you just have to convince him. You know how cats are. So you have to convince them that, you know, this is the right thing to do, and then they'll do it.
That reminds me on something. For example, cat herding.
Yeah, right.
I also had a comment on austerity. And back in Pukon, for example, when Peter came, he asked us, so what do you do for austerity? And he thought we have a very austere life, but everyone has their own austerity. Like, for example, I used to chant during Ekadashi 64 rounds and just didn't eat anything. And Kanai Prabhu, he liked to take cold showers, for example. For this was his austerity during that time. But doing austerity and listening to the darshans, to the preaching, and getting a taste, it's much more purifying than doing some bodily austerities. And I can say it from my point of view. I had this experience when just listening to you, to the stories of Kṛṣṇa. It's much more, because you develop this higher taste for the stories, for Kṛṣṇa, and certain parts it pierces your heart. you feel it. This is what it is. This is so beautiful, and just by listening, carefully and paying your attention or concentrate your attention totally on the darshan, it just purifies you much more. You get to much higher standard.
Hearing is one of the 9 processes of devotional service, but where is austerity? Is it on that list?
Yeah, it's not even on the list.
That means it's preliminary.
So.
Just like performance of pious activities and ritualistic worship, or the cultivation of knowledge. These things are preliminary. They're not directly devotional service, but they're required in the sense that they help make us qualified to perform devotional service.
Okay. So now I stopped doing that, fasting completely and just chanting and concentrating, but I feel I don't really need that much austerity anymore. But it's all good. From this point on, it's like, wow. And you automatically come to a higher stage just by listening to the stories.
Yeah.
It's like...
I'm not very austere, you know. It's like I find it really hard to fast completely on Ekadashi. I don't mind chanting a lot of rounds, but, you know, going without eating, oh boy, that's rough, you know. And, or sleeping very little, you know. In ISKCON, the standard was that you sleep 6 hours. Well, I never was comfortable with that. I would always either go to bed early or take a nap during the day, or I had to. I mean, if this body didn't get like at least 8 hours of sleep, I was pretty much... live a little bit differently from most of the devotees, just because of the nature of this body. That doesn't mean that there's not austerities involved. I mean, there are austerities in any group of people trying to work together with different types of personalities and so on. There's going to be the austerity of getting along with other people who are different than ourselves, you know. There's always going to be the austerity, like the austerity that we had of living in a very simple environment way up in the mountains, and you know, there were certain things that didn't work and stuff that broke all the time, and you know, it was just a constant kind of if you actually think about it, there were a lot of austerities. You know, being in a place where you don't really speak the language and you're not really a part of the society, and getting things done is often problematic, and so on and so forth. These are all austerities that we accept willingly in order to be associated with devotees. But it's interesting that even though you're talking about austerity, you didn't really bring these things up. It's like you didn't really consider them, you know? And it's a fact that the benefits and the pleasures of living amongst a group of pure devotees far outweigh any of the inconvenience or austerities that we do just to be a part of the group. And I think when we go to India, you know, the austerities are going to be different. They're still going to be there, but I still think we're going to be in this mood of like, well, they don't really matter, because the ecstatic experiences of being around devotees, and especially in India where there are lots and lots of devotees, are going to outweigh by far the inconveniences and, you know, little things like having to filter the water and stuff like that. I mean, we'll soon get used to that and living in a different style, and you know, because we'll be doing a lot of devotional music and dance and all these arts and stuff. I mean, it's just going to be so nice.
I had another question, and another aspect of austerity, would it be also consciousness, when you withdraw your consciousness from the senses, from the body?
That's the purpose of austerity.
That's the whole purpose of austerity, okay. And then things become much more easier.
Yeah.
You have
well, if you learn by deliberate performance of austerity how to withdraw your senses, because what do you do? What is austerity? It's deliberate suffering, voluntary suffering. Okay? I'm going to voluntarily take on some difficulty. So what you do is, when you do this, is that you withdraw your senses, or withdraw your consciousness from the senses, rather, and you fix your consciousness on Krishna by chanting or study or whatever. And the idea is that you conquer over this temporary austerity, this suffering, by redirecting your consciousness towards spiritual things. In other words, we learn the art of how to redirect our consciousness by this deliberate performance of austerities. And then when sufferings happen that we don't plan, we know the means of how to cope with it. Not only suffering, but also enjoyment. But the same strategy works. If something very nice happens, instead of getting all giddy and, isn't this great? You're like, okay, Haribo. Just maintain equilibrium in all circumstances. That's the platform, mental platform of detachment. And from that perspective, then devotional service can develop very nicely.